I say her name, I want to say Congresswoman ain't never scared Cori Bush. Another member of Congress told me Marjorie Taylor Greene might be crazy, but she ain't stupid. She know who to run up on. And she found out when she had a little encounter with Congresswoman Cori Bush. So thank you, madam, for being here representing St. Louis. Next, we have my longtime friend, Rashad Robinson. So Rashad has been in this movement before it was cool to be in this movement. I tell people sometimes, I've been black before it was popular. So Rashad's one of those people. He's been in this fight for a long time. He's the president of Color of Change, which is a leading racial justice organization with more than 7 million members. So when we say there's strength in numbers, Rashad Robinson is proof of that. And then we have Dreesen Heath. She is a researcher and advocate in the Human Rights Watch United States program, and she focuses on racial justice issues. So we don't have a lot of time. We want to be on time. I'm a Southern Baptist, so you know when the preacher says, I ain't going to take up too much time, and 2 hours in, he ain't even got to the announcements yet. We're not going to do that today. So I want to kick off and turn to you, Damario, because you are at the center of this fight for reparations. And one thing that we talked about, I'm sorry, I should introduce myself. I'm assuming everyone knows who I am. Hi, everybody. My name is Tiffany Cross. I host the Cross Connection on MSNBC on Saturday mornings. And thank you all for tuning in. For those who do every Saturday, the audience, I look out and you all are exactly the people who I want to make proud every weekend. So I thank you all for your support and tuning in.
You do make us proud.
Thank you, thank you. I appreciate that. So Damario, I want to start with you because you're at the center of this fight for reparations. And something we talked about a little bit this morning on my show is there are people who feel like I'm not responsible for what my ancestors did. So you want to come in and take my money for something I didn't do. But that's not exactly the case. This is state-sponsored violence that robbed the survivors and descendants of not only lives, but their livelihoods. So if you can, tell us what's at the core, what's at the crux of this lawsuit that you brought against the city of Tulsa.
Yeah, thank you, Tiffany, and thank everyone out there. The crux of it is a harm was done, damage was done to a people 100 years ago. We know who was harmed. We know what was stolen. It's very well documented, and we know who did it. We know the city of Tulsa authorized it, they armed them, and they gave them instruction to invade Greenwood. We know the county participated. We know the county sheriff participated. We know the Chamber of Commerce. Not only did they participate in the massacre, but after the massacre, when they put us in internment camps and forced us to work as enslaved people, cleaning up our own communities. So when they say they're not responsible, is the chamber still around? Yes. Is the city of Tulsa still around? Is the Tulsa County still around? All right. Is the state of Oklahoma still around? Okay, so the same entities who perpetrated the massacre and its 100 years of continuing harm through policy violence are still around. They're still responsible, and we tend, with the help of everyone here and everyone listening, to hold them accountable.
I want to stick with you, Damario, because from a national perspective, there's some confusion going on about the commission versus the Legacy Fest. So as I understand it, the commission has raised over $30 million to create this Walt Disney type tourist attraction. I'm just curious how much of that $30 million is going to benefit the direct descendants and survivors of the massacre who were actually impacted by state-sponsored violence.
Well, at this point, 0.00 of the $30 million is actually going towards the people who rightfully deserve to have compensation for the stories that they use and leverage to raise this money. And the beauty of it is people like you, Tiffany, people like Rashad with Color of Change, Human Rights Watch, Angela Rye, Roland Martin, EJI, LDF, Cheryl and Eiffel, national groups that said, you know what, Tulsa is the test case. Tulsa is the microcosm of our larger struggle. If we cannot win Tulsa, if we cannot get a victory here when we have living survivors, then how can we get a victory on a national level? So because you loved us so much that you came in and stood strong with us as we stood against the most powerful entities in this city, we were able to show the truth of the matter is that while they're around about monuments and plaques and planting trees and building buildings, we're about building people, building our wealth, and getting justice.
So I think that's such an important part of the argument, which brings me to Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, because when Congressman John Conyers left Congress, we had a champion in the Congresswoman who picked up the mantle of reparations. So I want to be clear for the audience, this was not even a bill for reparations. This was a bill for a committee to study the impacts that racial injustice has had on every part of society. Can you tell us, Congresswoman, what is the role of the federal government when it comes to the fight that Damario is leading and the overall case for reparations?
Tiffany, thank you so very much for really what you have done and your beautiful, powerful program this morning and continuous. And I just want us to give her an enormous applause. If we don't have voices, we have nothing. Mario, thank you. I always love a man that has a hyphenated name. So let me tell you that love is there. To my brothers and sisters who are here, to NCOBRA, to the National Commission on Reparations, to Color of Change, to Human Rights, Reason, it's a pleasure, to the 300+ multiple multicultural organizations on HR 40, to my sister who we have bonded, and I am so delighted. I serve as chair, she serves as vice chair. Powerful things will be coming. We're coming toward each other in so many different ways. Tiffany, I will never say that you are unright, but we have moved beyond the original legislation written by John Conyers. May he rest in peace and rest in power.
Amen.
It is important to take note of the fact that the HR 40 was written 1 year after a Republican president issued reparations for our brothers and sisters who are Japanese Americans, who in fact were interned in the 1940s, property taken unjustly, unjustly, without justice. And we, people of color, those of us who are descendants of enslaved Africans, rallied around our friends on the Japanese Americans for Ronald Reagan to sign the Civil Liberties Act of 1988. I'm boasting about that because I am not a fearful person. That means I do not fear you. If you're in trouble, I'm in a ditch, I'm going to get you out of the ditch. I'm not going to be afraid of you. And so as African Americans, my unangry approach is, don't be afraid of us. We too are America. And we too must not be disenfranchised, and our pain must not be ignored, and our story has to be told, and justice is ours, says the Lord. So lucky coming to Congress and being under the shoulders and umbrella of John Conyers on the Judiciary Committee, and when he retired, when he passed away, subsequently after, but when he retired, as one who had been a soldier, and young folk out there, there's no problem of being a soldier on the battlefield before you're a general, but being a soldier under John, he was kind enough to be able to give it. We then revised it. And so we have, it is a commission to study, it has an apology in it, but it is then to act, and it is a bill. So it is a bill that then provides for the development of reparation proposals. That report then comes to the implementators, the people's representatives in the House and the Senate. Our job is not to mouth words. Our job is not to pontificate. Our job is not to be on the floor of the House. Our job is to do deeds. It is to correct. It is to make things right. It is to repair. And my colleague who is en route here, my dear friend, the Honorable Barbara Lee, stands with me as she speaks of reconciliation. We speak of repair. She knows that repair has to go forward, and she is front and center on that. So to make the story, let me just simply say, this slavery was government sanctioned. Tulsa, Greenwood was government sanctioned. That's why my brother's in court. That's why, unfortunately, the courts did not do justice when they dismissed those cases early on, indicating barred by the statute of limitations. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. As far as I know, in some states, murder has no statute of limitations. Right. And so if you are going into court, even though some of these cases were civil, if you're going into court on the basis that somebody was murdered, then you're trying to get relief, there should be no statute of limitations. Moving on, and if you think the CBC, let me just quickly say, I know there'll be another time, but let me, in the spirit of Joyce Beatty, our chairman, I'm an officer of the Congressional Black Caucus, let me say that we are squarely, here's my sister here, we are front and center with you. We will never be moved. We are by the riverside, and we shall not be moved. Congressional Black Caucus is standing with you and is here with you. But let me finish quickly. The idea of H.R. 40 is that it is the actions both in Tulsa and various places that can be, let's say the overall bondage was government sanctioned. Plain and simple. I'm not knocking on my neighbor's door who doesn't look like me and try to get anything from them. I don't want anything from you. In fact, you may have pain that I may want to help you with. But right now, the pain that we have, or the injustice or the taking of wealth, was government promoted. So please, America and Americans and human rights activists and believers, it is government sanctioned. So we wrote this in the federal government because the federal government has to be the umbrella on a rainy day. The federal government is the one that sends soldiers in the battlefield to defend us. I didn't ask my neighbor to go get a pick and go over to World War II. I said soldiers will go. So the idea of this commission is not to leave anybody out. We're not talking about if you're saying money that we're leaving you out. We're not talking about if you're saying catastrophic change, reformational change, educational change, complete change, HBCUs being never able to close their doors. Nothing is to be left out. Please understand me, my brothers and sisters. It is that we will have the commission. We've got to hear you. We've got to come to Oklahoma for a hearing, just like they came here. We've got to go to Mississippi for a hearing. We've got to go to Harlem for a hearing. And the idea is that you will then come and give the report to the government because you've been injured by the government. The black codes, the failed Reconstruction, Jim Crow, lynching, and the civil rights movement and the 4 little girls in Birmingham, Alabama. And what, Tiffany, will happen is that the government, our federal government, will then respond. My words as I close on this question is, I too am an American. I wear the uniform of the police officer. Hear me out. When I say that, you know your brothers, your sisters, your friends, your neighbors, etc., have worn that uniform. I wear the uniform of the United States military. Uncle Red, 101 years old, Tulsa, went to World War II. They wanted him to be nothing. He was born. He should have been nothing. He should have been so angry that he did nothing. But he fought in World War II. With that in mind, I too am America. I cannot have a Congress or a government that fails me. I cannot be disenfranchised. I cannot be silenced. And I don't do it in anger, but I ask my brothers and sisters, let me thank my sister here coming in with all power, but also joining with fellow members. She just walked through the door. She's a co-sponsor, but others who don't look like either one of us, our progressive members of Congress that piled on to H.R. 40, conservative members, moderate members. Let me thank them. For now is the time to go to the floor and vote on this. I can't be silenced. My story cannot be untold. You cannot be frightened from me. I am not frightened of your pain. Don't be frightened of mine. So the theme that we should have as we go here, I said this earlier, you need to leave out of here with no shoes on. Because you need to be able to tell folk that I have run so hard, I've lost my shoes. Because I'm going to ensure that reparations is accepted by the global America. Because I will tell you as an internationalist that once America votes on reparations, her voice becomes the voice of human rights. And so the folk in the continent will hear her. The folks in the Eastern Bloc will hear her in Europe. The folks down in South and Central America will hear her. The folks in Haiti will hear her. And the folks in the Mideast will hear her. They will be able to hear her as a voice of conscience because they'll be able to see. And they'll say, she has repaired her people. Then she has legitimacy to help repair me. That is what H.R. 40 is. That's why I'm here. That's why I applaud my brothers, my sister. That's why I'm here to listen. And that's why the Congressional Black Caucus in numbers are flying in. I'm their Renaissance woman, their reconnaissance. I came in early to see if y'all were going to receive us. But anyhow, they're on the way. And they're on the way to be gifting and giving, and they're on the way. Forgive me, I'm so sorry. The passion is in my heart. I don't want anybody on here to have no shoes on. I'm getting ready to kick mine off. Because you need to show that you're out here working. Working. Working!
Just real quickly, I want to talk about work. And when we went to D.C. last week for our congressional hearing, which was amazing because of people like Representative Lee, Sheila Jackson Lee, and Representative Bush, she met us outside the Capitol because they were trying to have us drop off our survivors, and we were going to have to walk half a mile to the Capitol. She was out there talking to the officers, saying, no, these people will not be here. We got special treatment because of this woman right here. It was blazing hot. It was no cameras. It was no TV. She was just there for us. Walked us into a special interest, had to call the sergeant of arms because they had an order not to allow anyone through there. She made sure we got where we needed to go with ease and comfort. We thank her and the Congressional Black Caucus for everything that they're doing to support us here in Tulsa.
I think it's an important point you made about there were no cameras because so many people across the country always ask, well, what is the Congressional Black Caucus doing? And the work continues every day. And you have to remember that the cameras don't always show up when it's not a sexy story, or if it don't bleed, it don't lead, you know, and they're out there doing the work every day that doesn't always get that kind of celebration and attention, so I thank you. Congresswoman Bush, I want to move to you because your life has been touched in so many ways. You have quite a testimony. You're a survivor of domestic, police, and sexual violence.
Yes.
And despite all those things, here you are, a member
Yes.
of Congress, the first black woman to represent St. Louis, the first nurse to represent St. Louis in Congress. And no one can deny you are a woman of the people.
Yes.
And the people helped elevate you here. So even in your life, I think all of the issues that you faced are predicated on systemic and institutional racism
Right.
and white supremacy. So the important thing to remember about Tulsa, it's a microcosm for the rest of the country. This isn't about Tulsa. It's bigger than Tulsa. It's about all our lived experience. From your perspective, what would reparations do if Damario is successful in his case? What would reparations do? What would it mean for not just the people of Tulsa, but for the descendants of the enslaved people across this country?
So because, first of all, let me say to Tulsa, thank you for making sure you kept this thing before our faces so that we can make sure that we take this thing as high as we can go. I'm so sorry. I have to say, I'm so sorry that the world has made this a T-shirt. But we're doing the work. We're doing the work to make sure that it's not just a T-shirt. You know, just coming from a place where I didn't understand or know that the things that I was going through was not just my fault. You know, just living the way that I was living, just always feeling like I couldn't get anywhere. You know, am I a bad person? Did I do this to myself? Is it, you know, what is wrong with me that I can't get out of debt? What is wrong with me that I work a low-wage job even though I'm taking care of somebody, of kids all day long, and I'm teaching them how to read and teaching them Spanish, and I'm doing all of this, and I can't seem to, I don't even have health care, and it's messing up my credit. I can't seem to, it was just so many things, payday loan cycle and just so much, and I just couldn't understand, am I not worth more? How do people get there where they have a life where they don't have to worry every single day if something is going to be shut off? Like, what does that look like? I have gone for my whole life, after I left my parents' home, that has been an everyday thing for me. My whole life, up until very recently was, am I sure that something won't be cut off? Am I sure that I have the money for my rent? Am I sure that I have the money for my car note? Car insurance, how do I pay that? I got to pay this other stuff. Let's just be real. That was my life. But not understanding that policy affected my life in such a negative way because policy overlooked me. Because the systemic racism, when we don't call it what it is, when we don't talk about how institutionalized racism is, when we don't talk about how it's in every single thread, when we don't talk about how white supremacy is in every single aspect of our country, every single aspect of life, when we don't call it what it is, then we end up there thinking that it's me. When I think about my home, and I think about St. Louis, we're always number 1, number 2 for murder, for homicides, number 1 for police murder for year after year, number 1 for the murder of children by guns, all of these things. Is it St. Louis? Is it Tulsa? Is it Detroit? No. Nah. Is it black folks? No. Nah. You know what it is? We started out at this disadvantage. We started out with this inequity. We started out, they're telling us we need equality. Well, we can't get to equality if you don't go through the door of equity. And then don't talk to me about equity if you're not giving me justice. And the root of all of that has got to be love. But America don't love black folks. And we got to remember that. And so that's okay because we'll love one another. And the best way that we can love one another is to call it out and say, you know what, you won't get it for me, but we will. So we go to the local level and go and do that work in elected offices. We go to the state house and we do that work. We go to Congress and go to the federal office to do that work. So for me, what it looks like is, first of all, life. I always say, if Michael Brown, that's how I have to give honor to Michael Brown and to his family because that's how I got into this work. He would have been 25 a few days ago. When I think about, people say, well, what is justice? What does justice look like? Justice is Michael Brown being alive today. Justice is George Floyd being alive, and Tatiana Jefferson and so many others. That's justice. We don't have that right now, and so that's what we have to fight for. How do we get that? We're working for making sure everybody has a livable wage. I don't care what your job is. If you flipping burgers, baby, I want to make sure that you are flipping these burgers right, and I want to make sure that your mind is well and that your home is well, because if you're giving me food, I need you to be taken care of. So that makes livable wages for everybody, making sure everybody has health care. I watch my patients die. I'm a nurse by trade. I watch my patients die because they didn't have access to health care, or they had access but no care. And so they were rationing insulin. Me and my cousin, we sharing insulin. That's how my patients died. And you know what? Because I know that I got to do something about it. And so making sure everybody has health care, making sure each and every person has clean air, clean water, that's how we do it. Making sure we're investing economically in our communities. No, I'm not looking to anybody else to do it. I'm kicking the door in myself, and I'm asking whoever want to come along with me, come along with me. And we're doing this thing fearlessly. We're not asking, we're not begging, we're walking in, taking it. And to me, that's justice. When we save lives, I went to Congress to save lives. I can't even help people until I save your life first. So I went to Congress to save your life, and then later I can help you.
Rashad, the Congresswoman went to Congress to save lives. How are you saving lives, Rashad?
Well, that's a tough act to follow. But first of all, I am so honored to be here in Tulsa. The work that you all have done to make this conversation a national one is truly inspiring. And I want to say that right after the last summer, when many people thought the best we could do in terms of activism in this country was clap outside of our windows or uplift investigative journalism, it was racial justice that got people to the streets, motivated people to action, led to the uptick in voter registration. Racial justice became a majoritarian issue. So the work ahead is actually making sure it becomes a governing majority and not accepting anything less. And the thing that we talk a lot about at Color of Change is not mistaking presence for power. Presence is visibility, awareness, retweets, shout-outs from the stage. It's the thing that people want to give us so that we go away. But power is the ability to change the rules. When we mistake presence for power, we can sometimes think we've done something that we haven't actually done. We'll mistake a black president for thinking we're post-racial. We will sometimes think that America loving and celebrating black celebrities means that America loves black people as much as America loves black culture. And America can love, celebrate, and monetize black culture and hate black people at the same time. And those two things don't actually have to be in conflict. And so as I think about the road ahead and the work that we have to do at Color of Change to mobilize our 7.2 million members, black folks and allies of every race, I think about both the founding of Color of Change, which was in the aftermath of a flood, which was Hurricane Katrina, which was caused by bad decision makers and turned into a life-altering disaster by bad decision makers. And Katrina illustrated a lot of things that we continue to see, whether it's through COVID-19 or whether it's through so many other moments, because it illustrates things that are already written in research reports, already in documentaries, geographic segregation, generational poverty, the impacts of what we've done to our planet, all the ways in which systems are not broken but operating exactly the way they are designed. And the thing about those moments is that despite all those things, the thing that really animates them is no one was nervous about disappointing black people. Government, corporations, and media. So our work ahead is really about building the power to force institutions to be nervous about disappointing us, to do the work to hold the enablers accountable, to not simply go after the right wing, but to go after the corporations that play with the right wing and tell us that they're on our side and come for our money by day, but take away our vote by night. And then the final thing I just want to say about all of this is that we have to all start telling a different story, not just about what happened in Tulsa, but what happens in general when it comes to structural racism. Because far too often we tell stories about what's happened in our society, stories of inequality like they're almost car accidents, like they kind of just happen, right? So we tell these stories and it makes people feel so sorry. So when we tell stories about inequality that are unfortunate rather than unjust, we get charitable solutions to structural problems. And so what I mean by that is we will get people sending water bottles to Flint and then wiping their hands and going away instead of corporations paying their fair share of taxes so the pipes are actually clean. We will get people saying, let's do a service day at inner city schools instead of actually changing public education. We will get people saying, let's do reentry programs instead of ending mass incarceration when America has 4% of the world's population and 25% of the world's incarcerated population. So it's not that black people are less likely to get a loan from the bank, it's that banks are less likely to give loans to black people. It's not black people are less likely to get hired by big business. It's that big businesses exclude black people from their employee ranks. Because what we don't need is more financial literacy programs from banks that have targeted, excluded, and redlined us from the very beginning. We actually need structural change. We don't need mentorship programs from corporations. We actually need them to end the racism inside of their ranks. That is how we translate presence into power, and we can only do it by coming together. So, you know, Tulsa, you have done so much work to put this on the national stage, and so I'm going to ask one more thing from you, not just from you, but as you think about the folks out in the world, we need to continue to build more power in more numbers, because whether it is the work that's happening in Congress or whether it's the work that we are trying to do in local governments around the country to bring about more equity, we will always lose in the back rooms of politics unless we have the people lined up at the front door. So I'm going to ask you to take out your phone, because that's what we do at Color of Change. We translate energy into action. I'm going to ask you to take out your phones. I'm going to ask you to type Tulsa to 55156. Tulsa to 55156. That will sign you up to the work. It's going to ask you for your zip code, but I'm going to ask you to engage the people in your networks, because what we're going to be doing over the next year is working to support HR 40, working to fight for infrastructure, working to fight at the local level to force prosecutors to be accountable to our communities, and working right here with you all in supporting Damario and the survivors on the road ahead.
So that is how Rashad Robinson is saving lives through the work of Color of Change. And when you were talking about, the charity and infrastructure, and we don't need mentorship programs, and I sure wish somebody from the commission was in here to hear that, because I think that's a message, a word you gave us today. So, Dreesen, one thing that I find that's been really frustrating for me is the talk of reparations. When I've engaged people who have not been impacted by systemic racism the same way we have, and they say, their retort is, well, the talk of reparations makes people uncomfortable. And I could give a damn how uncomfortable people are and get comfortable being uncomfortable, because this is the conversation that we're having. And this isn't really a revolution, it's an evolution. This is a dinosaur that doesn't want to be extinct. How do we move this conversation into policy in a way that bypasses anybody else's feelings of discomfort?
Thank you for that question, and thank you all for being here. Tulsa has a special place in my heart, being born here, but having a homecoming, by responding to the compounded pain that you are experiencing, thriving through it all, but still experiencing it day by day. So I'm honored to be in community with you all today, and honored to be with this esteemed panel. It's interesting when there are arguments about reparations being a difficult conversation, or even acknowledging systemic racism, because what's difficult and uncomfortable is when Africans were kidnapped on the continent and brought over here, were brutalized, were raped, were forced into labor, and did not receive any restitution from those experiences. You know what's uncomfortable? When Tulsans were shot in their homes, shot in the streets, burned in their homes, their houses, their businesses. Black wealth, not white wealth built on black bodies. This was black wealth. It's uncomfortable when the National Guard is literally taking black people out of their homes, disarming them of their guns so that they can't defend themselves when they are rounded up into concentration camps, and malnutrition. There were stillborn and premature births in that concentration camp in 1921. Those are lives. Those are lives that didn't live. And yet we have survivors here today fighting, pleading. Mother Fletcher, first trip to Washington, and she had to plead for her life. So we're here today, to talk about, okay, what is equitable good policy? Something that federal, state, and local governments have done for white people historically, but not for black and brown communities, not for poor communities. But also the conversation about reparations. At the root of that word is repair. That should not make you uncomfortable. Y'all should go around every day next week and just say reparations. Randomly to people. Just say reparations. Reparations now. Right? That should not be uncomfortable. When we have a physical ailment, when we have a physical injury, we have to rehabilitate that injury, right? To get better. Or else you're gonna have complications in the rest of your body. And that's what black people have been dealing with their entire existence in this country. And so without repair, you can't even benefit from good public policy, because you have not rectified the past wrongs that are ongoing wrongs. These racist classist institutions are here today. They didn't go anywhere. So it's important that we, develop equitable policy, develop investments in infrastructure, but that has to come alongside reparations. I don't care about the feasibility. The government should have not committed the crimes and the harms that they did. You raise your price every time you violate human rights. And that's not on the part of the victims and the people. That's on the part of the perpetrators and people that are culpable. So they should have to live with that and account for that without any questions. We're here in Tulsa. The fight for reparations is live. It's live, and we need more people to be engaged. In international human rights law, kind of wonky, but there are many forms that are reparative, many forms that are necessary, specifically in the case of Tulsa, where you can't just have the government throw a history center and say, here's your reparations. Reparations is a victim-centered process. You can't handpick Black people out of the community also that you want to represent to say this is our reparations. What it is an extensive consultative process that centers the people that have been harmed from start to finish. It is no in-between. They should be a part of the decision-making, not we make the decisions behind closed doors and then we're gonna consult with you later. Only communities who have been harmed can determine their recipe for repair. And we should empower each other to keep that fight up and to develop multiple remedies. In Tulsa, yes, there needs to be financial compensation. There's hundreds of millions of dollars that need to be paid back, not just for loss of property and economic accessible damage, but also for moral losses, loss of opportunity. These things have been quantified in other countries. One example is Australia. Indigenous communities just won a high court decision for getting compensation for their loss to spiritual connection to land while they were colonized. They lost that. That can be quantified. That harm should be paid. But in addition to that, trauma-informed care. You're hearing Mother Fletcher, Mother Randall, Mr. Ellis live through their trauma as they testify. How is that impacting them right now? How is that impacting the descendants who have to sit in these rooms and live with whether or not their family members' bodies are in those mass graves? That have to live with the loss of intergenerational wealth, that have to live with the fact that they, may reside in North Tulsa and then are, beaten by police at 3 times more rates than other white people in other neighborhoods in South Tulsa. So it's a compounded issue that needs multiple solutions. And public policy is not going to do it alone, especially policies that have historically disinvested in communities like Tulsa, but it emphasizes why reparations must be comprehensive and address the full scope of harm that has happened here in this community.
Right. I think that, thank you very much. I'm coming to you. So, Damario, I think Dreesen raised some good points about Mother Fletcher, Mother Randall, and Uncle Red reliving this trauma and the way that we bury and normalize trauma in our communities. Something I thought was interesting, as you know, I spoke with Mayor G.T. Bynum about this commission, and Brother Nehemiah, who runs the Black Wall Street Times, his research, yes, absolutely. Please applaud for Nehemiah. He has a very fascinating report which unearthed some things about Mayor Bynum. His family, according to the census records of 1861, enslaved 987 Black people here in the country. And we asked the mayor about it. He says that, he doesn't know anything about it, was his official response. But I think the bigger point is he inherited his position in life. He inherited his wealth and has the temerity today to be against cash payout reparations to the people of the community, instead offering what Brother Rashad talked about, let's start with economic opportunity, whatever that means. So I'm curious from you and the people in Tulsa, he's an elected position. If the people in power are the enslavers, the descendants of murderers, the descendants of thieves, then how do we wrest away that power and put it back in the rightful hands of the people who once built this community and uplifted this community?
We build that power by what we're doing right here today. which is not just talking, but we're organized together. We have a diverse group of individuals and organizations just on this stage. You have elected officials, you have powerful policy groups, you have powerful organizing groups, you have law, and that's what we must continue to do. We must pool our resources, pool our talents, and work together. And those, at this point in history, there is no ambiguity. There is no neutrality. Either you're with us for truth, justice, and reparations, or you are against us, regardless of where you live or how you look. You got to pick a side. It's 2021. We have no time for ambiguity. A car parked in neutral goes nowhere. We're trying to go towards justice. As the sister said, before we can get to equity and equality, we must have justice, and that requires truth. The truth of the matter is people like Mayor Bynum, who says he's against reparations, what he's against is paying black people what we're owed. That is what he's against. Because let me tell you something that happened during COVID. During COVID, all businesses shut down just like all other places around the country. The city of Tulsa, with the mayor's positive and excitement pushing it, created a fund to provide resources, direct cash payments to companies and nonprofits impacted by COVID. Now, did I have anything to do with COVID? But some of my tax dollars went to these companies that were impacted by COVID. But that's okay. But when it comes to black people receiving what we are owed, that is when the Dred Scott belief that a black man has no rights and a white man is bound to respect comes out. We must fight against that at all costs. And let me say one thing that Dreesen said about this trauma. It's real. When I talked to Mother Fletcher and we about the Watchmen, and I showed her a clip during her deposition, she couldn't watch it. And I think when we have these movies like Watchmen and Lovecraft and other movies, which is good for awareness, these were people's mothers, grandmothers. When you see T-shirts that just have the name Smitherman or Stratford, these are real people. That's real trauma. And you take in their narratives, and there has to be an acknowledgement of that. That's why in our lawsuit, one of the things we call for is resources for emotional and mental trauma. And people need to be respectful before you do this documentary, this movie, whatever. You're talking about real flesh and blood. On The Watchmen, which I think is a fantastic show, they talk about the Dreamland Theater all the way through it. The Williams family is still alive. And they didn't receive zero from the Watchmen. So the exploitation must stop across all platforms. Banks failed us, stole our money. Insurance companies failed us, stole our money. And now they're being re-exploited. So I appreciate you bringing up the trauma because it's real, even for descendants who we're in contact at Justice for Greenwood Foundation. We're in contact with hundreds of descendants. They feel the trauma. And we know scientifically, Congresswoman, that trauma can live through DNA. It can be passed down. That's a scientific fact that we've already known in our community. It's a scientific fact. So as you said, comprehensive, it must be comprehensive across all platforms, and all exploitation needs to stop.
Thank you. I want to ask you, Congresswoman, because Damario makes a really good point about generational trauma in our community. And one thing that I found very fascinating about when Mother Fletcher and Mother Randall and Uncle Red testified on Capitol Hill, I mean, you called out Mayor G.T. Bynum. You sat in Congress and called this man out for his lack of response. So I'm curious from your perspective, representing the federal government here, the Congressional Black Caucus, the committees that you sit on, when it comes to the divide between the federal government and local government, how do we address this issue? Because we have the filibuster issue in the Senate. There is some level of negotiating with these Trump acolytes in Congress. And so given the people who gifted and worked hard and risked life and limb to deliver the power of the federal government to Democrats, how are Democrats showing up for the people on ground who are still in this fight? And what do you say to people who are still trying to negotiate your bill, H.R. 1, Before the People Act, the George Floyd Policing Act? What do we say to those people who are waiting for some sort of result for the work that they've done?
Well, Tiffany, thank you so very much. We have a job to do. 17 presidential candidates in 2020 asked by the the esteemed Honorable Reverend Al Sharpton indicated that they supported reparations. They're scattered across the nation. They're back in the United States Senate. And I want people to understand what H.R. 40, as we've listened to the lack of response, we listened to my sister recount next check, why am I like this? Understand that the position that we were put in is that we were basically left to our own devices, and that was not much. Abraham Lincoln did the 1863. Remember, those of us west of the Mississippi didn't get it until 1865. That was the Emancipation Proclamation. The Reconstruction was broken because of a compromise. And I think when we talk about history, we should understand, because, Tiffany, that is what, when you say what we're going to be doing, that is what maybe constituents of different members, congressional district, are pushing toward them. Why are we doing this? Because we fail to know. No one teaches the history, 1619 Project, so they don't know that nothing was ever given. And so you basically were left with nothing, but we became, in quotes, good citizens and made silk out of pig's ear. That's basically what we did. People want to talk about chitlins was what we had. Greens was what we had. Our diet came from what we had. And so we attempted to write the H.R. 40 legislation not to be narrow and not to be able to have our community say, well, what is it? It is a scientific, psychological, educational, economic, and political analysis of our condition today. And it builds upon the pyramid, if you will, of what I've just said, the broken, never fixed system of freedom that they gave, including, again, the lynching that went on. Then we went into a civil rights movement, and we shed blood then. We shed blood in World War I, World War II. We shed blood. We did it as good citizens, and yet we were broken. And PTSD is real. It is in the DNA. That's why you would ask the question, and then let me say to those negative folk, well, you got black on black crime. Don't say that to me. That's right. Okay? Look to these cruel actions that really can travel and be transmitted in the soil. We are on, I said it at the, I don't know what that was, City Club or wherever we were, forgive me, beautiful place, but we are right now in Greenwood. This is Greenwood. This is where bustling communities, Mother Mac or the Mac family's house you pass by, that's what we were living in 1921. Brick homes that no one gave to us. I took a moment to kneel on the grass and ask my faith, my Christianity, my prayers to be able to get me ready for dealing with this. I wanted to touch the grass. I am told we are on Greenwood. I can't see anything. I can't see Mother Fletcher's home, Mother Randall's home. I can't see it. But my colleagues have to understand, as Dreesen has said, that there can be no distaste for reparations because the wealth quotient now is so high, and I didn't create that. I did not squander my money that you gave me. I did not ruin my life. I didn't get anything. And so the government, I believe, and what the next steps are, and allow me just to call off Joyce Beatty, our chair, and Stephen Horsford, and Hank Johnson, Congressman Wilson. We are the executive committee, myself, Nagoose, and Brenda Lawrence, representing the Congressional Black Caucus and all their individual work. Our commitment, if you want to know for next steps, is that we are embracing H.R. 40 and that we hope and pray that we move it to the floor, that it is the action item of going into everything that we have talked about. We will look in the criminal justice system, why we are still fodder, why Michael Brown. And before I knew her, I was in Ferguson. I have this thing about kneeling. I knelt on the floor. I just have to get strength from it. And I saw the street, how narrow it was, and how Michael could have just been any other boy, just go on home, or just let me just drive away. Why did he lose his life? Why was he shot down? Is his life so devalued that you thought it didn't matter? That you could just shoot? Remember now, that comes down through the ages. Somebody is taught that our value is not worth anything. So H.R. 40 is to turn that around and to say, no, America recognizes that there is value. We didn't get the value. Mother Fletcher didn't get it. Your clients didn't get it. Tulsa didn't get it. Greenwood didn't get it. And it has to be valued. So that's the next step. When we did the commemoration, I don't want anybody to say, well, that didn't feed anybody. You never had anything in the congressional record to talk about this story. And the Congressional Black Caucus was determined, thank you to Senator Warren who has a bill, but we were determined in the Senate, let me thank her, to get it at least in the United States House congressional record. The story, the violence, we made it a priority. And we found a way where you don't move those bills that fast. That I came here where that bill was passed in the House of Representatives, H.Res. 398, that tells Tulsa Greenwood's story, because we made it a priority. We now go to the next step. We're going to go to the next step of the bills that we all have, that are the bills dealing with the criminal justice. Hank Johnson has a claim bill as he is proceeding to go to court. But you have to be with us. So when we say next steps, watch us. It is to get reparations. Never in the history of the United States Congress did a bill on reparations ever pass the Judiciary Committee or any committee. On April 14, 2021, that bill came out of the Judiciary Committee with flying colors. And what that means is it is ready to go to the floor.
That's right.
It has been vetted by a House committee. Without any bragging, that's why she got on it, most powerful committee in the United States Congress. It deals with your life. And so it got out of that committee. Thank you to our chairman, Nadler, and Steve Cohen, and others. So now, folks, next steps. Oh, I'm not saying that this is a panacea, that the light will shine and the bricks and mortar of where people live right now, that every question will be answered. But we will be in a position to demand response. And what that means is the report will come to Congress, and we as members will then have the authority. You got to do this, you got to do that, you got to do this. As it is now, even with the American Jobs Plan, we are all in that. I support the American Jobs Plan. I don't want to go small, I want to go big. American Jobs Plan right now, let's go big. And let's we're not selfish. American Jobs Plan doesn't have black people's name on it. So we go big, we're going to be all in the corners of Tulsa, all in the corners of Houston, corners of St. Louis, and every other corner. American Job Plan, let's go big. American Family Plan, let's go big. These are the bills that the Biden administration has offered. We're prepared to go big on H.R. 40, let's go big, and analyze and present to the American people that the worth of black people and the burden of slavery and the wealth we created, we made cotton king. No taxation then. We made cotton king on our backs. We made the transatlantic slave trade rich. We made the South, the landed South, rich. We made the Wall Street banks in New York. We made the commodities, the future in the Midwest. That was us. Do you understand that? Have some dignity, black folk. Stand up and say, that was me. That was me. That was me. That was me. I can't hear you. That was me. That was me. And I'm not selfish. That was me. And so my commitment is, with the legislative abilities that we have collectively, not negate my colleagues. I thank them. I want it to be public, that my voice may be shrill, but it is not angry. I want to go with them to get it to the floor. I want to thank my leadership. And I want them to understand that somebody said, it's repair. Yes. It's repair. So can we go to the floor saying it's repair so that no one will be angry and be saying, you've taken something from me? I don't want to take anything from you. Let me at least get on the docket so that, and I'll say this and I'll close, Human Rights Watch, my good friend Color Change, you've got to travel internationally to see our face internationally. And in spite of what we get angry about, America is still perceived as the hope. We've had our moments. I know we've had some moments. But if you're struggling in some village somewhere, if you are human trafficked somewhere, outside of this country, then they said, well, America's coming. Do you know the standing we will get internationally if we do this? I think I said at the beginning, I don't want to be redundant, but do you know the headlines in the French papers on the continent of Africa? Do you know the headlines? Because they live off of, is America good? So I don't know why our folk want to fight this when we're giving them a gift. Do this and your standing to talk to anybody gets to be where, America, they just gave reparations. Or they just passed H.R. 40. Or they just dealt and did what is right for people who were burned to the ground, bodies in the street. I get like this because I'm saying, what is common sense? It's not anything difficult to do. And the one thing I want to say to folk that don't look like me, it is important for you to understand my pain. Because when you're in pain, because I'm an American, the United States of America, I feel your pain. And I want to help, bail out companies that I don't have a dime in, but I figure somebody has a job because they got a corporation somewhere. The one thing I'll say about us, we're not a stingy people. We get in other people's fights. We get in other people's ditches, and we go to grab them out. We stand behind other people and along other people. We don't want you to be undermined because you don't look like us, but you're in a ditch. I want people to understand that. We have gotten in ditches with people. And so, America, you got to get in our ditch because we're given a gift. And that gift is that if you do this in many different ways, if you pull the people out, like my sister, who are still in ditches, your image will be without description. And your image will be such that your power will be not by your money, but it'll be by your deeds. That's the next step.
Thank you, Congresswoman. We are well over time, but because you gave us such a word, and because my brother Rashad brought up some really good points, I would just leave you all with this, because I think it's important that we live beyond hashtag activism. There are a lot of fights out there, from voting rights to the lynchings that are still going on today. And I just want to say there are people in this audience, you were the dream and the hope of the enslaved. And if that's the case, then what are you sowing into our community 100 and 200 years from now? What will our children 200 years from now, if they are our dreams and hopes, what are we sowing into our community today? If everyone does a little, no one has to do a lot. So thank you all for joining this conversation, for your spirit and enthusiasm for this wonderful panel. And Damario, we are with you in this fight. Congresswoman, we're with you in this fight. Everyone else on the panel, thank you so much for providing great context. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Tulsa. Okay. I'm Attorney Ben Crump, and on behalf of the Terrence Crutcher Foundation, and Justice for Greenwood, we are very proud to have this panel discussion here with you today. What does Black Lives Matter look like in the future if Black lives really matter? So often we have said Black Lives Matter to America, but we still don't know if they hear us. So today, we're going to speak truth to power by some of the people who have most been affected by America's refusal to acknowledge Black Lives Matter. Can y'all join me in saying, Black Lives Matter? Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter. Thank you. Before we begin our discussion, Dr. Tiffany Crutcher is going to join us, as well as some of her other family members. She just finished a luncheon with the survivors. I will say this, just to put it in proper context before we hear from these acclaimed individuals. It is so important that we're here today to be part of this commemoration of the 100-year remembrance of the Black Wall Street Massacre. Because we have to understand that this injustice was probably the greatest injustice of our people other than slavery when you put it in context. I mean, when you think about Terrence Crutcher or George Floyd or Botham Jean or Breonna Taylor or Ronald Green, any of the individuals that have been killed by police violence, multiply that by 100 times, and that's what you will get when you think about the Black Wall Street Massacre. I mean, not only did it destroy the family and the community and the culture in 1921, it has had an impact on Black America that has lasted to 2021. We're here to speak truth to power. I mean, it was a Holocaust situation for Black America. And so that's why it's important that we are here today, because like our Jewish brothers and sisters say, never forget, never again. Well, we come here today in Tulsa, Oklahoma, 100 years later, to make sure our children know and our children unborn know, never forget and never again. I'd like to acknowledge Michael Skolnick from New York, a young man who's been covering these matters for 15 years now. Thank you for using your influence to help bring attention and awareness to this with many others. So without further ado, we want to have a conversation. We'll ask the panelists just 3 questions, and then if time will permit, we will take a few questions from the audience. Is that okay? All right, we got the rules. So I will introduce everyone first, and then we will go to the first question. I am so proud of this young man, not just because he's my fraternity brother, but because he's an incredible lawyer and an incredible activist, and soon to be the next Attorney General of the state of Texas, and that is Attorney Lee Merritt. I have had the honor of working with him on the case of Botham Jean, which was one of the first times in American history where a white policewoman was convicted of first-degree murder for killing a black man. So him, Darrell Washington, I know he's working on Ronald Green case now. He's working on Atiana Jefferson. He is a bad brother when he go in the courtroom to stand up for us. So that is Lee Merritt. Now, this next young man, you all may recognize, ladies. He is an award-winning actor, but more importantly, he is a brother who do not think it robbery to use his influence to try to give a voice to the voiceless. I will never forget what Harry Belafonte told Trayvon Martin's parents and us at the NAACP Image Awards. What good is it having influence if you don't use it when it matters most? Where Kendrick Sampson always uses his influence when it matters most, when it matters to our people, when it matters to our community, and when it matters to our children's future. He is the co-founder of Bill Power. Give it up for the great actor Kendrick Sampson. And I am sure many of you recognize this next queen that is on the stage. She hails here from Tulsa, Oklahoma. You all have heard of the tragic case of her brother, Joshua Merritt, who was killed on June 8, 2017 by the Tulsa police officer while he was experiencing a mental health crisis. He was shot 5 times. I don't know why it is, Lee, that when black people are having a mental health crisis and we need a helping hand, we get bullets. Well, this sister, like many of the sisters of the movement, has turned their pain into purpose. She has started the foundation, Don't Hurt Them, Help Them. Please give it up for Naisha Barrett Hall. And then finally, without further ado, this next queen is a force of nature. She comes from St. Lucia. Many of you have heard about the tragic killing of her brother, who is, it's still just unbelievable when you think about it. They kill us for driving while black, shopping while black, banking while black. But her brother was literally killed for living while black. I mean, he was in his own apartment, minding his own business, watching his own television, eating a bowl of ice cream, when a white policewoman, Amber Geiger, mistakenly came in the wrong apartment, shot and killed him, and then said self-defense. Well, you heard about what happened with Amber Geiger. She was convicted of first-degree murder. I don't think that's been done more than 10 times in American history of a white police officer being convicted of first-degree murder. She has never stopped just with that conviction. She has founded and is the president of the Botham Jean Foundation. They have an annual foundation banquet in Dallas, Texas. And it is on September 6, 2018. Not only did she start the Botham Jones Foundation with Dr. Tiffany Crutcher and others, she also founded a national organization called Sisters of the Movement, because many times we think only about mother and father, but these individuals who were taken from this earth in unbelievable ways far too soon also have siblings. And so it was her vision to be able to give purpose to the siblings as well with creating the Sisters of the Movement, and she has been advocating in state legislatures and the United States Congress. Give it up for Alyssa Finley. So now that we gave everybody their propers, we're going to have the first question, and we'll go down the road this way, and then we'll take the second question and go the other way. The first question is real simple. To each of the panelists, what does Black Lives Matter? Well, before I do that, I want us to give a great round of applause for Dr. Tiffany Crutcher, your own native, a great leader, a force of nature, someone who has sacrificed so much for not only her family, but for this entire Tulsa community. Yeah. Yeah. North Tulsa. Thank you all. So the first question, and we'll start off with you, Attorney General.
Okay.
Okay. What does Black Lives Matter mean to you?
Before I get into my answer, I'm just going to ask you all to bear with me one more moment. As he did these beautiful introductions to everyone else, as often as we can, we want to give our brother his flowers. You mean so much to our community. You mean so much to us. Since I was a law student, we've been watching you stand on the front lines, and we're happy to be able to fight alongside you. Can you all give it up for Brother Ben Crump for me, please? All right, what does it mean? I'm just getting back from Louisiana. And 2 years ago in Louisiana, May 10th of 2019, a young man named Ronald Green was involved in a brief pursuit with law enforcement that ended when his vehicle came to a stop on an old country road near Monroe, Louisiana. That's in Union County Parish. During the course of his arrest, he suffered a cardiac incident and he passed away. His family was told that he died in a car accident. And the family went immediately. They left their home in Florida and drove to Louisiana to view his body. And they were told that his body had left Louisiana and was in a hospital in Arkansas. It was their first red flag. When they asked to see his body, they were told that they couldn't see it yet, that it would have to go through the initial autopsy. And after a couple of days, they were finally able to see the body of Ronald Green. And though they were told that he was in a car accident, they found his body covered with abrasions and bruises and scarring and dirt and blood from the top of his head really down to his feet. He had been repeatedly tased. He had been beaten with improvised brass knuckles. They used the handcuffs as brass knuckles. And the video of this assault was caught in high definition. It existed within the Louisiana policing apparatus. They knew that it happened. And they wrote in their reports and they told to the family that he died in a car accident anyway. And they made no mention of the brutal assault, the repeated electrocution, and the fact that he was in fact beat to death just 2 years ago. Someone's conscience got to them within the Louisiana State Trooper community, and they gradually began to leak out the videos of what actually happened to him. And it turned out that not only were the men, Officer Cori York, Officer James Clary, Officer Christopher Hollingsworth, who has since passed away, Officer Dakota DeMoss. Not only were they seen on that video brutalizing and killing Ronald Green as he begged for his life, as he told him, "I'm your brother, I'm sorry, I was just scared. I'm sorry I shouldn't have led you on this chase." But leadership within the state of Louisiana, from the state police to the supervisors, all the way up to the governor's office, participated in withholding that information from the public and obscuring the truth about what happened, the same way that we've seen them historically do here in Tulsa. Over the course of the last 3 weeks, all of that came out to the public. And we were upset about it. Some of you all heard about it, and there were protests. And there were phone calls made to the governor and to the attorney general. And we just left a protest where his mother and his sisters demanded that in light of this new information that they be held accountable. And they were promised that they should just trust the system. And they were told that the United States government, the Department of Justice, would do a thorough review of everything, and maybe in a couple of more weeks, maybe in a month or two, there would be some form of criminal accountability for the officers involved. In other words, they treated Ronald Green's life like it just didn't matter. Anybody else killed on tape, and you know the individuals who are responsible, you know their addresses, you know their first, last name. These same men went on to hurt other people within the state of Louisiana. They still continue to collect taxpayer dollars. In the state of Louisiana, the people of Louisiana have not come to a standstill to say, no, Ronald Green's life mattered. It's the same message that I got as a young kid in South Central. Every once in a while on the block in Leimert Park, where I'm from, someone would die. It could be a drive-by, it could be little Latasha Harlan when I was a kid. It could be Rodney King, who wasn't killed, but he was beaten brutally. And then every once in a while, a person of Anglo-Saxon descent, someone with white skin, would come to my community and die. And then we knew as kids, somebody died on our block, and the block is hot. You can't go outside. You're not allowed to walk to 42nd Street Elementary anymore. The block is hot because somebody died, and there must be what? Accountability. And that's the reason I think for the existence, the purpose of the Black Lives Matter movement is our community will stop the same way the white community does and say, no, someone died, and there must be accountability because our lives matter. To me, that's what Black Lives Matter means.
Thank you, Attorney Merritt. Mr. Kendrick Sampson, same question. What does Black Lives Matter mean to you?
Personally, Black Lives Matter means my introduction into grassroots activism in 2015 and trying to figure out how I was gonna do and act and use whatever privilege I had to end police violence. And I had tried charity and different policy actions and such, and really wasn't actions that weren't thoroughly connected to and rooted in the liberation movement. And that's what Black Lives Matter is a continuation of the abolitionist movement of black folks who rose up to say, not another one. We're gonna continue what the Black Panthers did, what Angela Davis represented, what the Combahee River Collective represented, was people who said and knew that we are actually safer without police, that we are actually safer without prisons, that we are actually safer without the systems that were created to oppress us and were created to harm us and target us and kill us and torture us. That we do not need those systems, that we keep us safe. And the problem is, just like the massacre that happened here in Tulsa on Greenwood and the massacres that happened to our black people all over the United States, they continue to massacre us, killing at least 300 of us a year by law enforcement, and that's the ones that are reported, right? In the same way that they keep on doing that and trying to convince us that we need to reform those systems in order to be safe, we continue through the Black Lives Matter movement to say, no, those systems actually make us less safe. They target us, and they say that our lives don't matter. And we're about to prove to you how much we do matter. How much we know, no matter how much you tell us we don't, that we matter. And it's an intersectional movement, right? It's a movement that says, that's implied all Black lives matter, that we're looking at trans Black lives, that we're looking at queer Black lives, we're looking at Black women, we're looking at children, we're looking at those who are differently abled. And I would be, excuse my French, it'd be fucked up if I did not talk about one of my comrades here who've been in the streets hardcore all the time, every week, every single week. We had a protest every week after George Floyd was lynched in LA, led by Black Lives Matter Los Angeles, every single Wednesday. And they had been out there for years, and we'd come out together. And Ashley Simone here, who's interpreting for y'all, has been out in the streets every single week and continues to do it.
Thank you, Queen.
And founded Pro Bono ASL. Pro Bono ASL, they go around the country now providing interpretation, making sure that folks, and advocating, not just at these events, but advocating outside for our Black folks that are differently abled and people of color. So come on, Ashley! She be killing it, yeah! And they gave me a name. Yeah, Kendrick, you see that? They have to give you the name. The reason they gave me this name, like this, is because I always wear these shirts. So there's that.
But the women want you to take it off, but we ain't gonna go.
But yeah, that's what the Black Lives Matter movement means to me. It showed me what true radical community is, how we keep us safe, and helped me envision the future and what that future looks like without police, without prisons, without oppressive systems, where we actually are liberated and free, and that it has to be through an abolitionist lens. That's my shit. All right.
Thank you very much, Kendrick. And now for Naisha Barrera Hall. What does Black Lives Matter mean to you?
Black Lives Matter is an important view overall. I think that it should be taken in consideration more, not just when it's police brutality, not when it's things going on in the world, but just the everyday community. It's already hard enough dealing with things day to day with every different race, but you tend to see Black lives really not come together only when it's a lot of commotion and things going on in the world. Just simple things as even opening the door or even just greeting one of your brothers or sisters in the community. So we need to take in consideration that Black lives matter on every occasion, everyday lifestyle, not just when it's police brutality, not when it's just white on black, but what about the black on black? We need to change the view and the take on how we look at Black Lives Matter. We matter to each other first and foremost, and that's really not being heard in the United States and in the community. We want to get together when things happen and when things are not going in the way that we want them to go. But if a Black person calls a peaceful protest on a situation of mental health, you get 5 people to come out. But if you call a violence or a fight or something in the Black community, the whole neighborhood is out. So we really need to just change our view and take on what it means as a whole. We all matter in some type of way, and it's not just when something is going on wrong in the community. So we need to really take in consideration, stick together on a day-to-day basis, no matter what it is, what the situation is, show up, help, be the change that we want to see in the community. And that's what it means to me.
Thank you, Queen. Alyssa, what does Black Lives Matter mean to you?
I look at Black Lives Matter as a response. Over the years where a lot of we as Black people have been silent when we've been mistreated over and over, I look at it as, since the movement has started, it's a response to us just not taking it anymore. I look at it as we're here and we're here to stay. We're not going to be silent anymore. And like Naisha said, it's not just for police brutality, but it's for everything. It's in corporate America. It's for in the police system. It's just for everything. Our voices are now being heard, and we're not going to keep quiet about it. We're going to continue pressing forward. We're going to continue I don't want to say storming, but we're going to continue marching on because enough is enough. To me, that's what it means. Enough is enough, and we're not going anywhere.
Thank you, Alyssa. Kendrick recognized the queen who was on the stage interpreting. I just want to give a shout out to the brother providing security for us. I don't know his name, but if you would stand up. Yeah, we always need all of us serving a role. We're in this together. So thank you, King. And our last panelist, I think, came over from the luncheon. Chief, we've asked, well, tell the people a little bit about you, sir, and then we will have you answer the question, what Black Lives Matter means to you.
My name is Chief Amushand. I'm the president of the African Ancestral Society, a descendant of Raymond Beard Sr., who survived the massacre of 1921. And I am an advocate for justice, for liberation, for freedom, for us receiving back our humanity, us being recognized as human beings again. When the question comes, what does Black Lives Matter mean to me? I'm puzzled almost, because how do you ask the oldest people on the planet why Black Lives Matter? Why don't you ask the father of gynecology, the so-called father of gynecology, why Black Lives Matter? Because some people have figured out and understand clearly why Black Lives Matter. And if you can't understand that we come from an original place, original source, then there are only lives. There are only human lives that matter. We shouldn't be in a position where we have to articulate to society why Black lives should matter, right? At what point, we've shown the whole world that all lives matter when we were on plantations nursing the children of our oppressor. Like, we've demonstrated to the ultimate degree why Black lives matter, even in the midst of a genocide, even in the midst of our Holocaust, even in the midst of every time we have to get on watch our brothers and our leaders on television trying to reserve their own emotion. Because I've watched Ben Crump, I've watched my beloved brother here, I've watched all of the people on this panel demonstrate why their Black life matter, why human life matters in such a way that if anything, people should be looking up to us, not down on us. That's why it matters.
Thank you, Chief, for speaking truth to power. Now, starting with Alyssa, we want to talk about solutions for a minute. What should we do to make America know that Black lives matter? If there's one thing you think we should be doing, I know time won't let us go through the whole litany, but the most important thing you think we should be doing as a people to make America recognize Black Lives Matter?
I think one thing we should do is to not be silent, to keep the conversation going, especially, I know for myself, I work in corporate America, and Black Lives Matter is something we don't say because I work for a predominantly white organization. And in keeping with the theme, I decided to just not be silent anymore. I invited Ben Crump to speak for our Black History Month committee, and he tore the roof down. He asked me, what do you want me to say? And all I told him was, make them uncomfortable. Because the way I see it is, if white people are not uncomfortable with these conversations, then they're not going to look at it, they're not going to think about it, they're going to go about their day thinking, well, I'm not racist because I have a black friend. So that's why we need to keep having these conversations, because we need to show them that sometimes what you do is unacceptable to us. I know in Texas right now, they're talking about the Crown Act for how black women should wear their hair. I don't support that because I refuse to ask for permission. You don't need to tell me how I could wear my hair. It's mine. We don't have a Crown Act for white women on how they wear their hair, so don't bring one on me. I will leave it at that.
Now, thank you, Alyssa. It is so profound what Alyssa said. I never forget, to the young people out there, there's a great Creole, a great griot who we have named Dr. Naeem Agbar, African-American psychologist. He said something so deep when I was president of Black Student Union. We went and met with the president of the university, and then we came out and we were all smiling and shaking hands and so forth. And Dr. Agbar said, now if you go meet with your oppressor and you all come out happy as if nothing mattered, then you were not completely honest when you spoke to him. It's as Alyssa said, it's going to be an uncomfortable conversation because you are oppressing me. And if I don't speak truth to power when we have a chance, how will our people ever advance? So thank you, Alyssa, for sharing that truth. Ms. Naisha, what solution would you offer that our people should do to make America respect black lives?
The main thing is be the solution. Prove them wrong that we are not what they think we are, that we can overcome all things, that we have a voice, that we have knowledge, that we have education. Take the jacket off. We can't fit it of being stereotyped of being these people. So more than anything, be a part of the change. Be who you know you can be, and not who they think you are, who you know you are. So stand up for what's right. Keep moving. Don't let anybody put the stereotype of who we are, because we know that we're not that. We're bigger than any problem. We can overcome anything, and we will stand on that.
Thank you, Queen. Kendrick, tell the people what you can't always say on TV about how to make America respect us.
I like this. I don't know how to say her name, but Malaika Jabali. She says, actually addressing the material needs of black people would upend the entire capitalist system. So we're given representation and expected to be appeased by hyper-visibility instead. So when you look at like this new administration, the Biden administration, and it's more diverse. Diverse has almost become a curse word for me. But, you know, it's more diverse than any other administration. Of course it is. It's a white supremacist institution. Oh, y'all didn't want to clap about that? America is a white supremacist institution. We're occupying indigenous land right now. They stole resources from our community, from black folks, right? And our labor, and they're living and profiting off of it still today. It's not a mistake that there was a massacre in Tulsa after we got our shit together, right? Despite them extracting all of our resources, torturing and murdering us and enslaving us, we got our stuff together, got our own resources together, did pull ourselves up by the bootstraps, and then they bombed us, right? And then the survivor's descendant was killed by police here by the same slave catching system that reformed and renamed itself. So when we're talking about what we need to do to prove Black Lives Matter to them, right? We got to commit to abolition. We got to commit to a bad seed produces a bad tree. How many, I know y'all been to church. Some of y'all been to church, right? A bad seed produces a bad tree, produces bad fruit. A good seed produces a good tree, produces good fruit. Them bad seeds of slave catching will always be what they are. The police will always be what they are. Right? Slave catchers. Prison system will always be slavery. Capitalism will always be an anti-Black economic system. So we have to uproot, we have to commit ourselves to organizing and uprooting those systems from the roots. And then in the Bible, it says, burn them roots. And plant new seeds that our communities actually need. And we don't have to wait to plant those seeds. We can build up the infrastructure for mental health care in our communities, right? We can build up non-traditional ways of healing each other, right? We have to organize, 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 and commit to abolition. That's how we get out of this. And we don't, here's the other thing. You said, what I can't say on TV, I'll be saying it anyway. They just cut it out the interviews. But I'm being frank with y'all, I'm tired of the word peaceful protest. I gave up on that a long time ago. You can't kill us constantly and be like, you know what? I don't like the way you're responding to this. We should be peaceful. Malcolm X said, I'm nonviolent with you as long as you're nonviolent with me. Trust and believe, they killed one of mine. Just saying. So we have to commit to staying in the streets, organizing every single way we possibly can, infiltrating those institutions and dismantling them from the inside, from the outside on the streets, making sure we organize each other, and most importantly, recognizing that we keep us safe. So we have to care for each other and have grace in knowing that even in our interpersonal conflicts in our community, it comes from these systems that have infiltrated our communities and turned us against each other. I'll shut up.
Thank you, Kendrick. And, you know, he's not here. Kendrick said something profound. I think we should recognize Attorney Damario Solomon-Simmons, a great lawyer here in Tulsa who's leading the effort for justice for Greenwood, because he and Dr. Crutcher raised $400,000 to give $100,000 to each one of those survivors. And I thought that was an incredible example of self-fulfillment, self-uplifting prophecy that we're demanding reparations, but also we're going to take care of our own to mirror what Kendrick was saying. Now, as we come to another great attorney who is doing something that is quite profound, because oftentimes we say we need the people on the street to go get further involved in the leadership of our communities. And Lee Merritt has actually taken this literally. He has made the decision to leave his comfort zone of being out there on the front line with the activists And I've watched his maturation over the years, because he was off the chain back in the day. But now this brother is running for Attorney General of the state of Texas, and when he's successful, he will be the first African-American Attorney General. So Lee, it is very possible you're going to be in the room as a decision maker. What things, or what thing most importantly, because I know time is getting short, do you feel we need to do to make America respect black life?
We've had such substantive remarks from our brothers and our sisters that I'm going to give what probably feels a simplified answer, but I'll explain why I'm giving it before I say what it is. It has something to do with birth order. I was born in South Central LA, the third of 3 boys, and a sister came 10 years later. My mom was 16 when she had my brother. My earliest memories of my dad was incarceration. And I was raised in a gang culture. You know, my father's rolling 60s Crip and everybody around me bang. And, you know, that's an environment that a lot of people don't survive. The reason I was able to thrive and do really well is because I was a little brother, right? And I had 2 brothers who are 6'5" and 6'7", and they don't look exactly like the kind of guys that you want to run up on a general basis. And so I felt pretty comfortable in my skin my entire life. I felt like I could do what I wanted to do. I could say what I wanted to say, and I was protected because I had people who radically loved me. They weren't always, you know, the most resourced or the most articulate, but I wouldn't cross me, right? Because I had my big brothers there, and they loved me. My family loved me. My community loved me. I learned this from Nipsey Hussle. My hood loved me, and they would protect me, right? I think that's the answer. We have to radically love each other. And when we start saying words like love, people feel like that's soft. No, we don't need to love each other. We need to die for each other. Well, why don't we live for each other, right? Like, that is love, right? And I think if we had this, you know, the Bible says you should know them, but you should know followers of Christ by the love that they have for each other. I think if we start to look at each other and we go out of our way, anytime people try to put their mouth on Brother Ben Crump, or when they put their mouth on your brother, on the brother of Botham Jean, or your brother when they try to attack him and say, well, you know, what else were the police supposed to do? And Kendrick goes too far. Even if we disagree with Kendrick, like, well, yeah, maybe he did go too far. In public, that's my brother. You keep your mouth off of him, right?
Amen.
And I think if we begin to radically love and protect each other, then all the plans, these well-laid plans, because every time we fail as a people, every time we fail as a movement, is because we betrayed each other. Because whoever the hyperbole they are, our enemies, are not strong enough to stop us. They've mentally conditioned us to stop each other by this myth of lack of resources and lack of opportunity. Well, if Kendrick get on, I guess I can't get on. Or if Ben take all the cases, what? You know, the fact that there are so many cases for us to have to fight over.
Every week.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I didn't want to just say love and have a kumbaya moment, but really love each other to the point where, just like family, we're family in here. And when they killed Ronald Green, I took it so personally. When they killed Botham Jean, I took it personally. When they killed our brother George Floyd and he cried out to us, we take it personally. And when you take it personally, you can't move on. You simply can't move on. And so a lot of people felt like we had a George Floyd year, right? But the truth is, we had a George Floyd moment, and we must continue to fight the way we fought for George, for Ronald Green. We have to continue to fight for a Tatiana Jefferson. We have to continue to fight for Sean Monterosa and Sean Taylor and so many names. Each one is like our brother and our sister. And this is the last thing I'll say, and I'll talk to the keypad wars, the social media wars. I hear more often than not people who are understandably frustrated by this occurring over and over again, and they say, man, if that was my son, if that was my brother, then they tell us what they would do when they're lying. Because if it were, that is your brother, that is your sister, and if you love them, you fight right now, not later.
Thank you, Attorney General. And it is really deep because what Leah is articulating is something that's not very popular. And I know because everybody who knows me, I end every conversation with, I love you, brother, or I love you, sister. And people sometimes say, man, you use that word too loosely. I say, nah, we need to tell each other we love each other more in the black community. I mean, we have to let one another know that we love each other because America sure ain't saying they love us. If they ain't gonna say it and we ain't gonna say it, how are our children gonna know who love us? And so that's profound what the Attorney General was saying. The other thing I would say is, you know, they try to saintanize Martin Luther King, but you have to remember when he was out here where Kendrick was at, America didn't love Martin Luther King. In fact, he was the most hated man in America. It's amazing how this revisionist history has happened. But one of the things you could not ever say about Martin Luther King was that he put forth hate on anybody. He radically loved everybody. I mean, and that was in every example, even when he stood up against America on the Vietnam War. He said, I'm doing it out of great concern because I'm disappointed. I couldn't be disappointed if I didn't love you, if I didn't care about you. So, Lee, thank you for that profound point of saying we need to have radical love for one another in the black community. Chief, you know, you got the easy job because you got to hear everybody else answer. But I know you're going to say something that could be easy or that could be hard because I know you want to be an original and not duplicate anything. So, no pressure here. But what do you think is the most important solution that you could articulate for the Tulsa community and all America who's assembled here watching about how to make America respect black lives? And before you do that, I do want to I think Color of Change is screaming live, and I saw Rashad, the executive director of Color of Change, walk in. Is he still here? Well, let's still give that brother his flowers, his love. Color of Change do great work for our community. Chief, without further ado.
Well, one thing I'll say is we don't compete with each other, we complete each other. All right? So I'll say that first. I'm actually glad I was last to speak because one thing I love to say, and people who know me know I say this a lot, there are only two human emotions, love and fear. That's it. Everything else branches off of love or branches off of fear. So we know we do love each other. We're the only people in America, when there's an incident where it's a black-on-black crime, we're the only people who have an anti-violence protest or anti-violence rally. You don't see no other community do that. Regardless of ethnicity, we do that. Because through our trauma, we still love each other. America fears us. They fear this mindset, this collective body we have here, total, absolute fear. That's why we have to love each other. So in loving each other, you have to be what you seek. 2 people's lives I saved in 2020. One had a mental condition, looking through a trash can, a sister in the middle of the heat, looking through a recycle bin, trying to get some clothes. Police rolled up on her. I said, hey, what's going on? Well, we got a call from the store owner. Let me deal with that. Right? Let me deal with that. Because she was hot. Emotionally hot and physically hot. Not a good combination. Right? Another brother down the street attacks another brother, and he on drugs. So I make it my business to say, in my community, I am the authority. I have to be the authority. We have to take control, because when you take control, you can dictate. When Mr. Barre was killed in our community, I asked our current police chief, can you recite me the code, the policy on what to do when a member of our community has a mental crisis. If you can't recite the code as a captain, how can you enforce it? That's why I say they fear us. We just have to keep loving us and manifest it through action. That's how we show them that our life matters. That's how we show the world that our life matters, because we see it, but we're so beat down, we don't acknowledge it when it happens.
Wow. Thank you, Chief. Final question for the panelists, and I'm gonna do my best Oprah, because I'm gonna mess with them a little bit. But we're gonna be able to take possibly 4 or 5 questions. If you have questions, be ready to stand up and ask them to an individual specifically if you can, because time is of the essence. Starting with you, Chief, we're gonna come around the panel, and I know specifically Naisha and Alyssa are going to, we can't take any audience questions? Okay, all right, we gotta do rapid fire. We might not be able to take audience questions. Chief, if you could say something to Terrence Crutcher about where we're at in America today, or where we're at as a community today, what would you tell him as he looks down from heaven?
I would say thank you so much, because you and your life sacrifice has manifested more than most people have done in their whole entire lived life. That makes him a spiritual legend. That's how you make saints, right? In our tradition, in African tradition, that's how you become deified into sainthood. So we look at people like Terrence Crutcher. I look at him now. I can feel him now. I have chills behind my coat sleeves. Terrence Crutcher, thank you for your sacrifice. It won't be in vain.
Thank you, Chief. Lee Merritt, in 1 minute, if you could tell Atiana Jefferson something, what would you tell her?
So Tatiana's sisters called her on site because she was the fighter among them, right? And she was super smart, and she graduated at Xavier near the top of her class, and she should have been getting into medicine when she was killed playing video games with her nephew instead. I hate to borrow a line from antiquity, but what you do in life echoes through eternity. And so the way she lived her life, the example that she set for little Zion and for her family, and she was a rose who grew from concrete. Like so many of us, we inherit that. So it's important that we learn, and I go to almost a funeral a week because that's how bad it is out here. It's important that we learn about the people behind the hashtag and borrow from that energy, because that force, that life force, is our inheritance.
Thank you, Counselor. Kendrick, man, if you could tell George Floyd something, what would you say to him?
Well, my Houston brother, hometown, H-Town. He's from the Trey.
Ward.
Yeah. I would just say we're going to call your murder, your lynching, what it was. You were taken from us too early. Now you are with the ancestors, and you're behind us every step of the way as we fight for liberation. And the way that we will honor your name is by continuing that radical work of dismantling and abolishing the systems and the culture that allowed for you to be lynched last year.
Thank you, Kendrick. Speaking truth to power. Naisha, if you could say something to your brother Joshua in front of your hometown of Tulsa, what would you say to him?
I would say that I love you. and you didn't die in vain. And mental illness matters. And even if it's one person that we can help change or make a difference, the Don't Hurt Them, Help Them foundation will be that change. I would tell him that you didn't do anything wrong. In fact, it was your purpose to go the way that you did in order to save other lives and other souls. And we will continue to move in mental illness matters. So he did exactly what God had in store for him, is to be the front of mental health matters.
Thank you, Naisha, for that. Alyssa, if you could be in that apartment the moment before Amber Geiger came in, not that you could change the outcome, but if you had that last time to talk to your brother, what would you have said to him?
I think there's so much that I would have liked to say to him. I know one thing is that I love you. It's something we did after every conversation, and our last conversation on September 6th, we spoke about everything until he entered his apartment. And when we hung up the phone, I thought, damn, we didn't say, I love you. And I was gonna call back, and I said, well, I'll speak to him tomorrow. And tomorrow never came. So I would tell him I love him. I would tell him I thought his murder would have been a turning point in America, because an unarmed, innocent black man killed in his own apartment, minding his own business, I thought that would have been a wake-up call for police officers, but it wasn't, because we had a Tatiana Jefferson killed in her home, Breonna Taylor killed in her home, and so many other people in between. But we're not done yet. I will for sure continue to fight, because I want my brother's death to mean something. I want so much good to come out of this, and I won't rest until we get it.
Thank you, Alyssa. Now, let's give another round of applause for Alyssa, for Naisha, for Kendrick, for Lee, and for Chief. I will tell you in conclusion, y'all can stand up with us.
And Brother Ben Crump.
Let's remember this, for Dr. Tiffany Crutcher and for the survivors of Greenwood. Let's remember, and you all have heard me say this often, Dr. Martin Luther King said that the coward will ask the question, is it safe? He said expediency will ask the question, is it politically correct? He said vanity will ask the question, is it popular? But he said conscience will ask the question, is it right? And Dr. King concluded that there comes a time when one must take a position that's neither popular nor politically correct or not even safe, but there comes a time when one must take a position because their conscience tells them it is the right thing to do. It is the right thing to do to stand up for our children. It is the right thing to do to speak up for our children. It is the right thing to do to fight for our children's future. We have to fight for their future until hell freezes over. And then we have to be ready to fight on the ice, because that's how much our children need to know we believed in their future. That's how much our children yet unborn need to know that we believed Black Lives Matter. Thank you to the Terrence Crutcher Foundation. Thank you to the Sisters of the Movement. Thank you to the Justice for the Greenwood Project. Thank you for these great panelists. And thank you to you all, Tulsa. The whole world is watching you this weekend. God bless you. Fight the power.